Hello, everybody. Welcome into the Fantasy Pros Football Podcast. I'm Ryan Wormeli, joined, as I am every Tuesday morning, by Andrew Erickson. We are talking trade show. We did part one already, the running back segment, so I encourage everybody to go check that out, either on YouTube or on audio, wherever you're getting your podcast. We did some macro level strategy talk. We reacted to the Monday Night doubleheader, and we dove deep on the running backs. This episode is going to be diving deep on the receivers that we are buying and selling, and then also a little bit of discussion on the quarterbacks and tight ends as well. Erickson, before we dive in, I do want to let everybody know that if they want a chance to win one of the most unique pieces of NFL fan gear out there, the large NFLPA wall smack, courtesy of our good friends at Trophy Smack, the #1 destination for epic fantasy football hardware, then this is your shot. Their oversized, officially licensed NFLPA wall smack are bold statement pieces that are perfect for your fan cave, office, or living room wall. It's not just decor, it's a way to rep your favorite players in style. To enter, all you need to do is subscribe to the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel right now and drop a comment below on any of our videos. That is it. We will be announcing a winner right here on the channel, so make sure to turn on notifications so you don't miss your chance to claim this epic prize. All right, Erickson, who is your #1 wide receiver to buy?
Not just my #1 wide receiver to buy, but probably my #1 buy low player regardless of position, and that is the one, the only Mr. Brian Thomas Jr. for the Jacksonville Jaguars. I think that this is just the quintessential buy low spot for a player that we know is super talented, and all of the usage has been there for him, just the production has not followed. So he has 19 targets through 2 games. He has 5 catches for 60 yards. Now, he does have a rushing touchdown as well, but clearly the receiving has been very underwhelming. But I haven't seen anything from this offense where it suggests to me that, okay, this isn't going to turn around anytime soon. Trevor Lawrence, I think, has looked relatively good in terms of producing for fantasy. Now, he has had a bit of a turnover issue, at least especially last week against the Bengals, but he's airing the ball out. They're not afraid to throw the ball, and I like that he's going to get more situated, more comfortable in Liam Cohen's offense. I think that's going to also be accompanied by a Brian Thomas Jr. kind of renaissance. And so I think that he's going to fix things. If you just look at the usage, he's 7th in terms of expected fantasy points per game through 2 weeks. I know last week was brutal. He had that drop on 4th down. Trevor Lawrence missed him in the end zone. But again, if those balls are moved just a little bit, he catches that 4th down, then we're not freaking out as much. And I think to add legit insult to injury, well, you have the wrist injury that had popped up with Brian Thomas Jr. I don't think it's a big deal. It seems like it's not like the biggest thing in the world. This isn't like a knee injury that we're dealing with. So I think that he's going to be fine. And I think right now he is by far this is just a great opportunity to buy low on a super talented player that, we were taking at the round 1, round 2 turn. And I think people are starting to panic.
If you were redrafting today, would you still take him like at the end of round 1, early round 2, or would you like maybe have moved up some other receivers ahead of him or running backs or tight ends or whoever?
I mean, it's possible maybe some more running backs would move ahead of him, but I don't think that I would move him so drastically in the wide receiver hierarchy or rankings where I had him. I know that I still had guys like Nico ahead of him and Drake London ahead of him. I don't know if that would change that. Puka, again, still had in front of Brian Thomas Jr., but I'm just not worried about what he's done so far. He's still the alpha in this offense in terms of target share, and I just think that the usage just suggests, hey, this is going to turn around for him. Like, he is when you're just looking up all of the peripherals of a buy low wide receiver, it is literally Brian Thomas Jr. that it's looking you back in the face of, has all the usage and no production to follow. What does this mean? Well, he's going to produce in week 3. Well, actually, maybe not week 3 because he's facing the Houston Texans, so he might get the Derek Stingley treatment. But
yeah.
Through 2 weeks, Derek Stingley has, I would say, looked human at times. He's gone up against Devontae Adams in week 1, Mike Evans in week 2. And look, Mike Evans had some opportunities to catch touchdowns and make plays against Derek Stingley. So I think that Brian Thomas Jr. is going to be up for the challenge to take on a former LSU guy, Derek Stingley. So yes, Brian Thomas for me is the #1 buy.
Brian Thomas Jr. or Jackson Smith and Jigba rest of the season. Because you talk about the usage, nobody's getting better usage than JSN. He doesn't have a touchdown yet this season, but 13 targets, 9 catches, 124 yards, then 10 targets, 8 catches, 103 yards. He has moved ahead of Thomas in the consensus rest of season rankings just by 1 spot. It's JSN at wide receiver 9 and Thomas at wide receiver 10. That is a really interesting one to me. I think I would I think that you probably should have JSN ahead of Brian Thomas Jr., but I don't know if I would. Like, I think I would, like, the correct answer is probably to do that because the usage is already there. Imagine once he starts catching touchdowns. But the upside of Brian Thomas Jr. is maybe too tantalizing for me.
That's a good player that you brought up because I think that I also have JSN one spot ahead. So that's someone that I would talk again when you were talking about redrafting or re-ranking these players for a draft season. I think that I would probably put JSN ahead of Brian Thomas Jr. because it's still in the back of my mind that, you know, it was Mac Jones that did kind of unlock Brian Thomas Jr. down the stretch last year, and that's not the quarterback anymore. It's Trevor Lawrence. So it is possible they just don't have that same connection. Whereas we're 2 weeks in with this new offense with Sam Darnold, and it has been the JSN show. And then there's like these other guys running routes that get targets in the Seahawks offense. But when they throw the ball, it's going to JSN every time, and he's looked absolutely fantastic. So I think that JSN is probably still the safe bet because, again, I think the wrist injury is not a big thing, but if it ends up being a thing and it, you know, derails his season, well, okay, then was the riskier move to make. Whereas JSN, it's like, what's the thing that you talk about with the bird in hand versus the what is that one thing called? How do you explain that?
A bird
one?
in the hand is worth two in the bush. I think it's something like that. It basically. Basically, the idea is like, you know, you already have this, so don't risk it for like, don't get greedy and try and get more. I think I actually could be botching that, so I don't say that with any degree of confidence. I'm gonna look it up while you keep talking.
But I think that.
Oh yeah, I kind of had it right. Yeah, bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. It's better to be content with what you have than to risk losing everything by seeking more. I should have had confidence in myself. I knew it.
All right, so that's kind of how I feel about the JSN versus Brian Thomas Jr. situation.
Yeah. Anything on some of the vibes just around Thomas Jr.? I mean, you mentioned like maybe some of the injury stuff with the wrist. Like there were some of those comments from like Liam Cohen after the game, you know, about him, you know, like not, you know, going after catching the balls like over the middle and stuff like that. Now there was also a lot of conversation online about like Trevor Lawrence does throw kind of a lot of hospital balls, and like you can kind of be understanding of why a receiver might respond in that way. But any of that conversation worry you at all with Thomas?
I think it does worry me a little bit, but it also worries people that have him on their roster, which is why you could buy him. Like, you usually can't buy players like this. You can't get them in trades because nobody wants to trade them away. But I think that the upside he can deliver because of how talented a player is, he is worth the risk in most situations where you feel like you need an upgrade at your receiver spot. I think it's worth chasing the ceiling with Brian Thomas Jr., especially if you're 0-2. Right? If you're sitting in a hole, you need to make an upside swing. I think Brian Thomas Jr. is the guy to target.
Let's go to your next wide receiver to buy. Who do you have for us?
Keon Coleman, wide receiver for the Buffalo Bills. He is coming off a down game in week 2, just 3 catches for 26 yards on 3 targets. However, you want to add the context in. This was a blowout win for the Buffalo Bills where the Jets had to put in Tyrod Taylor in the second half. It was really no contest. And to point out Coleman, he actually had all of his production in the first half. So he wasn't really expected to do a lot in the second half because the game was in hand. He actually had a 4th target in this game that was erased because of an offensive pass interference call. And it was a brutal matchup. Like, he was going head-to-head against Sauce Gardner, who's been playing well through 2 weeks of the season. So, again, similar to what I talked about with one of our running back buys, I'm not just going to forget what I saw in week 1, which was a Keon Coleman full-fledged breakout as the wide receiver 1 in this Bills offense, and then just completely forget about it in week 2 after he has a dud, which I think was kind of predictable, just based on the matchup against the New York Jets. In week 3, they're playing the Miami Dolphins. And this defense, where am I telling you? Watch the whole Patriots-Dolphins game. This defense cannot stop anything. We could go out there and score points against the Miami Dolphins defense because they cannot stop
Erickson,
anyone.
Don't make me post the video of you running routes again. You could not score.
Dude, I would get
Dolphins.
open against the Miami Dolphins defense. Like, that's how bad they are. And I think that Keon Coleman's going to have a massive bounce back. And I think that something I didn't think about either, with Dalton Kincaid healthy, I think that he's starting to eat into the production from Khalil Shakir, which is why we haven't seen that much from Shakir, at least last week and even in week 1. So I think that Keon Coleman breakout is for real. And I think we're going to continue to see it in week 3, even after it stalled out a little bit last week.
Miami point is a huge one. I was going to bring it up if you didn't. Like, obviously, this is the cream of the crop type of matchup you could find. I would just say, like, you point out that we should remember the context for week 2 of it being a blowout. We should remember the context of week 1 being that they were getting blown out and had to throw a ton in the second half and in the fourth quarter to have that miracle comeback against what was a clearly gassed secondary, against a Jair Alexander who hasn't practiced all offseason. And his touchdown came on a very fluky tipped ball that was intended for somebody else, and he just happened to be in the right spot to catch it. So, like, he did look good. Obviously, it was a step up over what we saw his rookie season. So I don't want to take away that entirely, but the truth is somewhere in the middle, right? Like, if we're going to remember the context of week 2, we should remember the context was perfect for him in the other direction in week 1.
Yeah, I guess for me, it's about who do you want to buy on the Bills? Who's attainable to get attached to Josh Allen? And when I'm looking up and down what I've seen through 2 weeks, that guy's Keon Coleman to me, because I think that he has the highest ceiling. Now, to your point about, well, if he doesn't catch that tip ball in the end zone, does he catch touchdown? Maybe not, but he's getting red zone targets. Like, that's what I'm feeling about Keon Coleman. That's what we saw last year, too, before he got injured with, again, another wrist injury, which derailed his season. So hoping that doesn't happen to Brian Thomas Jr. here. So, and the Miami Dolphins matchup, again, it's a great matchup for him. Great spot where
are you going to rank him this week?
He'll probably be top 36 guy for sure. I think he's going to be my highest ranked Bills receiver by far.
Yeah. Well, Keon Coleman and Brian Thomas Jr. both seem like strong buys. You can use the trade analyzer at fantasypros.com/myplaybook or in the Fantasy Pros app to instantly evaluate how any trade will affect your team for this week, the rest of the season, or even in Dynasty. Let's get to the wide receivers to sell. Erickson, who is your number one guy here?
Going with T. Higgins, wide receiver for the Cincinnati Bengals. Goes without saying, it's obviously a downgrade going from Joe Burrow to Jake Browning, and I think that this is going to hurt T. Higgins probably the most. I would probably be more concerned about Higgins even than a guy like Chase Brown, where I think you can make the volume argument where Brown could be okay. I think that Higgins is much more dangerous to keep on your roster. Without the long touchdown in week 2, which I was very happy about because I had the anytime touchdown bet for T. Higgins on the Betting Pro show, and that one ended up cashing for me. But if he doesn't catch that pass or score, he would have bombed last week. He would have done absolutely nothing. He went 1 for 5 on his targets from Jake Browning. And when you look at the game logs from 2023 in the 5 games that he played with Jake Browning at the end of the 2023 season, Higgins averaged just under 12 points per game, which you say, hey, that's pretty good. He had 2 games with 20 plus points, but Jamar Chase missed one of those games. So realistically, he had 1 good game with Jake Browning and Jamar Chase in the lineup. His other 3 games, he scored fewer than 8.5 fantasy points. So I think that this is a extremely boomer bust type of player. Through 2 games, T. Higgins is wide receiver 49 in expected fantasy points per game. That's with Joe Burrow playing a game and a half. So I am trying to move on from T. Higgins. I think that this is a situation where I think you can sell low on Higgins because what's the upside with him now? Well, he doesn't have that same upside where, well, if Chase goes down, Higgins could be a top 5 wide receiver. That's no longer the case without Joe Burrow. And historically speaking, Higgins has never been someone that's even finished as a top 12 wide receiver. He's always been top 15 in terms of points per game. His touchdowns last year really kind of thrusted up his production attached to Joe Burrow, and that's not going to be the case with Jake Browning as his quarterback. So I am trying to get Higgins off my roster, trying to sell high, quote unquote, after he caught a touchdown last week. But I'm just trying to see what I can get for him.
Yeah, I mean, Higgins isn't somebody I have a lot of because I've been burned by some of the injury stuff before. He is the number 2 in his offense. Like, I know, I think Fitz, Pat Fitzmaurice, our colleague, was like really high on like there is league winning upside here. And I just was. There were players in that range that I liked better. So I don't actually have a lot of, Higgins to trade away. I'm looking, I wanted to throw some names at you, like, would you rather have Higgins or this guy? And a lot of them feel kind of obvious. There's a few I want to save for our buy, sell, or hold segment later in the show. And the guys that are ranked above the ones I want to save for that are like Teteroa McMillan. Like, I think that's an easy one, right? Like, Devontae Adams, Garrett Wilson, I would imagine you would agree you'd rather have than T. Higgins. So it feels kind of easy. The name that I'll throw out there is another veteran. Would you rather have T. Higgins or Tyreek Hill rest of the season? They're 2 spots apart in ECR.
Yeah, that was interesting. I thought you were going to also say Jalen Waddle, too. I think for me... Yeah.
Waddle's ranked a lot lower in the consensus rankings for some reason, so that's why I didn't pick him. But I think it would be a valid question.
Not my rankings.
Yeah.
Shockingly, no one. I think I would, and I don't say this easily because I have not been high on Tyreek Hill at all. But if you're trying to play the upside or rolling the dice, I mean, if Tyreek Hill gets traded to the Chiefs, right? Do you like his outlook more than T. Higgins with the Bengals rest of the season with Jake Browning? I think you'd probably just take the Tyreek Hill side of things. Now, it's still no guarantee he gets traded to the Chiefs. I think that you're really trying to think ahead, but I don't think there's a non-zero chance that happens. So I think I would rather have Hill, just off the off chance that something like that does happen, where he gets traded to a contender where we feel better about his situation, whereas T. Higgins' situation is not changing. He's the number 2 receiver attached to Jake Browning, which may not be that great. So I would rather have Hill, and I would probably rather have
for whatever it's worth on Browning, like Higgins, his 40-yard touchdown was from Browning. So
yeah,
just for whatever that's worth.
The other 4 targets were not in the stratosphere of him catching.
All right, give me your other wide receiver to sell. Another receiver that I basically roster nowhere.
Deebo Samuel. I talked about him last week, and he almost had a dud. It looked like he was trending towards having a dud on Thursday night, but he did end up scoring the touchdown in the fourth quarter, which did kind of salvage his final stat line. Now, he still had 7 catches on 8 targets for 44 yards. He's another receiver that's dealing with a quarterback injury. Now, Jaden Daniels is dealing with a knee sprain, I believe it was reported. We'll see how long, if he even misses any games. It's possible he still plays in week 3. But this is just lingering in the back of my mind that, okay, Daniels is banged up. Now, if he gets hit again, takes a weird tackle, could he miss more time down the line? And that's where I get really concerned about this Commanders offense if Marcus Mariota has to take over. So Deebo has started out the season great. And this is kind of what I expected just based on Terry McLaurin coming into the season after a training camp holdout. McLaurin has predictably started really slow, and Deebo has taken advantage of that. But even in week 2, McLaurin was the target share leader. It looked like he was getting back to what we saw from him last year, commanding more targets, catching more passes. And Deebo Samuel right now, he just smells and looks like a prime sell high because he's a player that traditionally always starts out the season very, very good, but then falls off, especially as a player that's been banged up throughout his career. Right now, he's top 5 in fantasy points scored above expectations. So again, looking for players that kind of check off the boxes of, okay, this is a player that's production's probably not sustainable. That's Deebo Samuel for me.
I apologize. I got distracted by a message on Slack. So if you said this already, I'm sorry. I don't think you said it. The Packers might be the best defense in football also. So like when you look at like, okay, if he had a down game, I know he had the touchdown, but like a relatively down game besides that, I don't want to hold that against a lot of players going up against Green Bay. Like this looks like I was expecting a bit of a come down from the Washington offense anyway this year. So maybe I shouldn't even be giving as much credit to the Packers as I am because I was expecting some regression from the offense they were facing. But I have a feeling with Micah Parsons in town and the way the rest of the defense is playing that a lot of players are going to have really bad weeks against Green Bay.
Yeah, I think that's definitely something to consider. And it was one of the reasons the Lions offense really bounced back after they faced the Packers in week 1. But I think in the long term, now Deebo could bounce back in week 3 against I believe they're playing the Raiders. So he could still have a good game. But I just think long term, when we're talking week 9, week 10, I don't know how much of a factor Deebo Samuel is going to be at that point. If McLaurin is back to his regular self with Jaden Daniels, if he's healthy or not. I just think there's a lot of long-term question marks I have about Deebo Samuel sustaining his production.
Let's do some quarterbacks and tight ends. We're going to kind of group these positions together most weeks, so we might not always hit on one or the other. We'll do one buy and one sell of kind of the group of them together, just again, because quarterbacks, like unless you're in a super flex, it's a little different trading them. And same with tight ends, honestly, unless you're in a tight end premium, like it's pretty much just like what are your tight end rankings here? There's not a lot of tight end for other trades outside of very specific scenarios. So we'll kind of group these together. Give me your buy out of this position group.
I'm looking at tight end. I'm buying Juwan Johnson. It's been 2 weeks of Juwan Johnson big slot season in New Orleans, and it's been fantastic. The guy has been absolutely peppered with targets. He had 10 targets last week. He has not been super efficient, which I will admit. As Pat Fitzmaurice likes to tell me, Juwan Johnson's still probably not that good at football, which I don't necessarily disagree with. But when you're seeing double-digit targets every single week from Spencer Rattler and you play tight end, then you're going to be fantasy relevant. So that's the difference between Juwan Johnson and some of these Saints receivers, where you look at Olave's targets and then his final box score, and you're kind of disappointed because the guy has double-digit targets every single week, but then he does 5 for 60 or 5 for 50. And that's disappointing from a wide receiver standpoint. But at tight end, this is a gold mine we have in New Orleans with Juwan Johnson. So I think that he is emerging as a usable starter. He leads all tight ends in expected fantasy points per game this season. And it's because of the every down role he plays in New Orleans offense. 96% snap rate in week 2. Half of the battle with fantasy tight ends is, are you just playing enough? Are you on the field enough to generate fantasy points? And Juwan Johnson checking off all those boxes. So I don't think that this is like fake, because I think that his role is pretty intact. And the Spencer Rattler offense with Kellen Moore, they run a lot of plays, they run fast, they run up tempo, and you're just going to continue to see volume. So that's why I like Juwan Johnson. As again, if he's still on your waivers, I think that he's a great pickup if you need tight end help. And I think that you could probably just trade a backup receiver or someone, a backup running back to get him if someone else already has him on their roster, because these waiver wire guys tend to not be highly valued by managers that pick them up. So Juwan Johnson for me would be a tight end I would be looking to add or, buy.
Do you think Spencer Rattler will be the starter all season? And if that changes, would you be, worried about having invested and traded for Juwan Johnson?
Yeah, I think that's definitely something to keep in mind, to not go crazy trying to get Juwan Johnson, who, again, I did preface it with saying he may not be that good, which is something that you always want to be wary of when you're trying to buy a player. But just based on the usage that he is deploying out here, he's a very serviceable tight end that with Spencer Rattler, I think you can have confidence in. To your point, if Tyler Shuck does end up playing, I think that does hurt Juwan Johnson. So I think there may be a situation where if Juwan Johnson continues to see double-digit targets every single week, but still kind of is middling in terms of his efficiency, maybe he becomes a sell high at some point down the line. If there are more rumblings about, Tyler Shuck might get the start this week, maybe that would be the opportunity to try to cash out. But for right now, I think that he's someone you want to try to get on your roster.
Who are you selling at quarterback or tight end?
I'm selling Mark Andrews. So I hate to bring up, I had to talk about a Ravens player because we haven't talked about anyone yet. So Mark Andrews for me, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing your take on this, because it's been 2 weeks of Mark Andrews without Isaiah Likely in the lineup, and it has been 2 weeks of nothing from Mark Andrews. Week 2, 3 targets, 1 catch for 2 yards. He did have a carry, which was interesting, but the snaps are still there, 80% snap share.
Did you watch the game? Did you see the carry?
Yes, I did.
Because this is just what they do. They do the tush push with him rather than Lamar. So it's not really I wouldn't frame it as they gave him a carry out of the backfield. This is when they want to get a 4th and 1 in their own territory or something, really need it. They like using him with the tush push. It's their version of it.
You consider that it could be a touchdown play too, where if they're at the goal line, they could tush push it in with Mark Andrews, but the touchdowns just haven't been there. And even in this past game, he had 2 targets in the end zone. Both came up short. I think that the bet on Andrews was still on touchdowns. And I don't know what happened in week 2, but everyone else was scoring touchdowns except for Mark Andrews. Devontae Walker, all the guy does is catch touchdowns. I think, aren't all of his career catches touchdowns?
Yes, he has 3 career catches. They're all touchdowns.
So that was my concern, was not even with Walker, but I thought Hopkins could be a guy that would be a touchdown threat. He's obviously had a bigger role, even though he's catching touchdowns outside the red zone because the guy's just an absolute monster. And with Isaiah Likely coming back, I'm trying to see where's the upside case with Mark Andrews here, because through 2 games, the Ravens offense has been scoring points at such a high rate, and Andrews has been a complete non-factor. So I would be looking to sell. Worm, you're the Ravens guy. Am I totally off base here with what I've seen for 2 weeks, but I like Isaiah Likely coming back?
I'm much more concerned about the week 2 performance than the week 1 performance.
Agreed.
Because the week 1 performance, keep giving the ball to Derrick Henry or keep throwing it to Zay Flowers, because those 2 things were just working. Why get away from it? In this one, the running game was not working. They needed to throw. And despite that, they still threw fewer than 30 times. That to me is a huge red flag for the passing game in terms of fantasy production, that the running game would be this ineffective. There was nothing going against this defense, and they still didn't even throw 30 times, and they scored 40 points. Now, some of those scoring 41 points were short fields because of the defense, special teams returns. There was a touchdown scored by the defense. So that 41 is a little bit misleading. I would say actually a lot bit misleading. But the point is, they won in blowout fashion without a running game and still didn't throw that much. And it wasn't Zay Flowers had 150 yards and was just clearly always open all the time. He had a good game, 7 for 75. But again, no Isaiah Likely, running game not working. and you still can't get anything. I will say, I thought he did have a touchdown. It was ruled not a catch, and they did not, end up Harbaugh considered throwing the challenge flag and didn't. I thought it could have been called a touchdown. Now, that still would have been like, okay, so what, he had 9 receiving yards today and a touchdown instead of 2 receiving yards and no touchdown. It still wouldn't have been a great day, but there would have been some touchdown deodorant there. So it is worth noting that they will still look to him in the red zone at times. But yeah, I was really, really concerned. I wonder how much you can trade him for at this point, given what we've seen the first couple weeks and what everybody remembers of the first 6 weeks of last season when he was literally scoring zeros, which was, not much worse than what we got out of this game. So I wonder if that'll be in the back of people's minds too, rather than the second half of last season. The fact that this has all happened without Isaiah Likely is the biggest screaming red flag, though. Because he is going to come back at some point and just eat further into us. I thought there was runway here for Andrews to have a really strong start to the season, actually healthy, no Isaiah Likely. Didn't happen, and that's really concerning to me. So I would be looking to move off of him. He's let me see, rest of season. He's at in 10 rest of season. The names around him, Njoku, Hawkinson are right ahead of him. Ferguson, Kincaid, Juwan Johnson are the 3 right behind him. I mean, it's kind of an uninspiring group regardless, right? Like this scenario is the reason why that we were saying just draft Tyler Warren and Tucker Kraft
yes.
late, if you miss out on the top 3, was because this middle range was just so unappetizing.
Yeah, so I mean, nobody has this problem with Mark Andrews because everybody has either Tucker Kraft or Tyler Warren on their team. So hopefully this isn't a problem we're dealing with. I think to your point, in trying to sell him, maybe you just wait till he has a week where he does score a touchdown. Because we know he's going to score touchdowns at some point just because of how he's used in the Ravens offense. Maybe that gives you a better sell high window. But if you have him on your roster, you need to be looking for avenues to move off Andrews because right now you can't start him with a lot of confidence.
Yeah, it's sad, but I think extremely fair. Let's do some buy, sell, or holds here. I've got a couple of wide receiver trios for you, and a quarterback, and a tight end trio. So we'll go through all of them here quickly. A wide receiver, Marvin Harrison Jr., Courtland Sutton, Terry McLaurin. Again, that's Harrison, Sutton, and McLaurin. Buy, sell, or hold.
I want to buy Marvin Harrison Jr. I know that he's coming off a lackluster a performance in week 2 against Carolina Panthers, but I still like what I saw a lot from him in week 1, and I still think that there's an upside case for him as a year 2 receiver taking that next step. The Cardinals schedule I think is still very favorable to start the year, so I will buy Marvin Harrison Jr. I'm going to hold Courtland Sutton just because last week was really weird in terms of how he was used. He was only running a route, I believe, on like less than 60% of the dropbacks. It was Troy Franklin that was seeing the most routes run, which to me, it looks like a blip on the radar in terms of how Sutton is traditionally used in the Denver Broncos offense. Usually he's always like the alpha guy, and he did have some red zone targets, drew some pass interference calls. I think that last week's stat line is not really indicative of the true performance of Sutton, so I think that he should bounce back in future weeks, so I'm not really concerned about Courtland Sutton. And then Terry McLaurin. I could have probably listed him as the buy because he seems like he would be someone that would be looking to ascend in the... Again, I've talked about this with Deebo Samuel where, McLaurin's going to get back up to speed and get back to where he was at points last year, but the vibes just with McLaurin overall, I don't know if he was ever a player I really wanted on my roster this season, on my teams, just because I knew that he probably wasn't to catch as many touchdowns as he did last season. He had the training camp holdout, and a lot of times, like, these guys off these holdouts they never really have that good of a season. Now, Jamar Chase was the one exception last year where he held out, he sucked for the first couple weeks, and then just was an absolute monster wide receiver 1 overall. So I think that there maybe is a buying opportunity with McLaurin if he's cheap enough, but I think maybe I missed that window, and I don't know. I didn't really want to draft him for the reasons I laid out, and I'm not sure I want to change my tune. Even if the process says, hey, you got to buy low McLaurin, you got to flip Deebo for McLaurin because he's going to get better, but I don't know. I just kind of want to go hands off, especially with the Daniels knee injury now. I don't know if I want to get invested into that, so I think I'm just going to shy away and just sell McLaurin.
Would you take all 3 of them over T. Higgins?
I'd take Harrison over T. Higgins. I would take McLaurin probably over T. Higgins. And yeah, I think I probably would take, Sutton I would take over T. Higgins. So yeah, I think I'd take all 3.
All right. Next wide receiver trio here, George Pickens, DK Metcalf, Zay Flowers. Buy, sell, or hold.
Ooh, I'm so glad you brought up Zay Flowers. Dude, he looks unstoppable through 2 weeks. And I can only imagine what's going through your mind as you're watching how good he is for your Ravens team, but then remembering that you didn't draft him in fantasy. Because, and I don't think that anyone, I don't think the process was wrong. It just, the one thing that was always in the back of my mind was like, how does Zay Flowers beat us if he's just really good? And through 2 weeks, that's what he's been, is just really good. He just looks like a stud receiver on the field. So I don't know. I want to get your thoughts on Flowers. So right now, I'm not going to sell him. I'm probably going to hold Zay Flowers, DK Metcalf, and then who's the other player that you listed off?
George Pickens.
Okay. So I'm going to hold Zay Flowers. I think I'm going to buy George Pickens. Even after he had a big game. George Pickens, I believe, was my buy last week on the show, and that ended up looking like a pretty good call after he had a good game against the Giants. I think something that was notable about Pickens last week was a lot of his usage and targets didn't come until the second half of the game, specifically when Kevontae Turpin actually missed time. So Kevontae Turpin got knocked out with a neck injury and was seen with a neck brace after the game, and you don't want to think that, oh, well, now Pickens' usage is going to like explode without Turpin, but Turpin was seeing decent amount of volume and touches in the Cowboys offense. So if he's going to miss time, I think that bodes well for Pickens to elevate that floor significantly. Dak Prescott, I think, has looked really good through 2 weeks. You know, we're talking about, okay, number 2 receivers attached to a guy like Dak Prescott. He can still thrive in that situation. So I think for me, it would be George Pickens. I would be looking to buy, and then Metcalf would probably be my sell. I think probably you could get the most for him. He's had 2 pretty good weeks, I would say, to start the year with Aaron Rodgers, and he's also playing the Patriots this week, so that's another smash spot for him. I still question how high the ceiling can be with Aaron Rodgers. I mean, Rodgers had an amazing game in week 1, and Metcalf was just okay. He didn't catch any touchdowns last week. He didn't have a lot of yardage. He did score the touchdown, so he was fine. I think maybe Metcalf, and this is what I talked about him during draft season, was I kind of just felt like he was overvalued because I think he's kind of like just an overall overrated wide receiver. And I think after 2 weeks, we're kind of seeing that where he's been okay. Nothing groundbreaking, but not a outright bust. But I think maybe if you put him on the market on the trade block and think, well, I can flip DK Metcalf to get Zay Flowers. Yeah, sign me up for that. So I think Metcalf, although I don't think that you need to sell him, I think you can probably get a decent chunk back for him just based on what he's done for the first 2 weeks.
I am still nervous about Zay Flowers from a fantasy perspective and would probably look to sell him, honestly, because week 1 was awesome. Week 2 is basically what I expected for a lot of the season, which is about 7 catches, something in the 70-yard range, but no touchdown. And week 1, he had the big game and the touchdown, so he was wide receiver 1 on the week. But week 2, he was wide receiver 31, and that's kind of what I expect most weeks, truthfully. And I just don't see how the touchdown stuff's going to change. It's going to need to be big play touchdowns, which maybe he runs hot on them, and it's great. But like, I am not coming on. I mean, again, he's great in real life. I love Zay Flowers, and he looks awesome. But I don't think the passing touchdowns, the receiving touchdowns, I should say, are going to be there for him. And I think that will be a constant anchor around his fantasy value. So if you can sell him to somebody right now who's like, Zay Flowers looks great, this is a breakout, he's a league winner, to you, like, I would do that, honestly, because I think there's going to be a lot more wide receiver 31 finishes than there are going to be wide receiver 1 finishes. Yeah,
no, this was one that I could really see go either way, and it's why he was kind of like a divisive player to talk about during this.
It's just touchdowns. Like if that part of the game is just eliminated, like it's not a part of the equation. If your league doesn't count touchdowns or whatever, right? Like in that case, yes.
Who plays in a league without touchdowns? That's a league that you should not exist.
I know. Like I think the volume will be there to make you happy, but the touchdown volume, I would be really shocked. I don't see a path, barring him running hot with long, breakaway touchdowns, which is possible. Barring that, I don't see a path to him getting 8 touchdowns this season. And I just think that's going to limit his ceiling.
Would you take, so the same question to you, so you would take Metcalf over Flowers rest of the season?
See, honestly, I don't really like Metcalf all that much, which is kind of why I included them together.
No, that was a good question.
I would probably rather have Zay, but I would rather sell Zay because I think you can get more for him right now. Like I think right now,
I agree that he.
Yeah, because remember, this buy sell hold is not a ranking; it's
Yeah.
Who do you want to buy? Who do you want to sell? Who do you want to hold? And Zay, maybe I'd rather have than Metcalf, but I would rather sell him because of what you can get.
Could you get Zay Flowers? Could you sell Zay Flowers to get Brian Thomas Jr.? That would be ideal.
I think you'd probably need to add something, but I would be willing to do that. If you could pair Zay Flowers with something else for Thomas, I would do that in a heartbeat.
You could do, I'm thinking Zay Flowers with either a Krosky Merritt or Jordan Mason. Would that would work?
I would
right?
do that.
Yeah.
I would absolutely buy Brian Thomas
like
Jr. in that scenario.
Yeah. I like that.
All right, let's go to quarterback trio here. Daniel Jones, Bryce Young, Cam Ward. Buy, sell, or hold.
I'm going to sell Cam Ward, although he looks much better than the box score suggests. I just don't trust him with Callahan calling the shots in this offense. I think that he's holding Cam Ward back, so not as hopeful for what he can do. And I just think that the Titans don't have enough weapons. I mean, when Alec Ayumanor is your number one wide receiver, who is a day 3 rookie, yeah, I think that he has a lot of upside, but I just don't think the consistency is going to be there. I think Daniel Jones right now is... I think he's the buy, as weird as that sounds, and to be suckered into this again, but we've done this before with him when he was in a good situation in New York. The one time it was actually a good situation, he was a top 12 fantasy quarterback. Like, he's actually put it all together before in a good situation. So for me, it would be Daniel Jones because he's in a situation that's not terrible for the first time in a while. And Bryce Young would be a hold for me. He still is doing some of the stuff that has your hair pulling out, but he's also scoring fantasy points at the same time because he's throwing garbage time touchdowns. He's still using his legs, and the defense is still terrible for the Carolina Panthers, which is the ingredients that you need for a fantasy quarterback that scores fantasy points, but you just don't want to watch the games necessarily and think back to, oh, this is a very Blake Bortles-esque stat line. That's been Bryce Young. So that's kind of my overview on those quarterbacks.
We got to get out of here, so I'll jump to the tight end trio one here. Harrold, Fannin Jr., Juwan Johnson, who we did talk about, and Dalton Kincaid.
This is a good one. I think I'm going to buy Harrold Fannin. Rewatching that game with the broadcast, and Worm, you can attest to this as well. I think they said 5 or 6 times how much the team loves Fannin, how much Joe Flacco loves Fannin. Everyone's obsessed with Harrold Fannin. So I think that he is a talent, and I think that the team eventually does move on from David Njoku at some point this season. So Harrold Fannin for me. Does concern me that the team might not have Flacco under center at some point as well. When you have the rookie quarterbacks, I don't think that's going to be great, but maybe it's kind of like a net in terms of, well, Njoku's gone, but the quarterback downgrade happened. So I think Fannin's still set up pretty well. So I'm going to buy him. I'm going to hold Juwan Johnson for the reasons that I already talked about earlier.
I was going to say, I was expecting you to buy Juwan Johnson.
Well, I mean, I like Fannin because I believe in the talent more, right? Than Juwan Johnson, who it's really about the usage with him. Like, he is just being a usage monster right now, which can change depending on who the quarterback is for the Saints. So that's my only reservation with Juwan Johnson and just about buying him, and especially compared to someone like Harrold Fannin. But then my sell would probably be Dalton Kincaid. And that's not because he's not seeing... I think his target rate per route run is really high. He's been more involved in the offense. When I was watching that game, Tony Romo talked about who was the broadcaster for the Bills and Jets game. He was talking about how he expected Dalton Kincaid to catch 8 to 10 balls against the Jets. Now, that obviously didn't play out that way because there was a blowout and the Buffalo Bills just ran over the New York Jets. I think that there are going to be good games in the future for Kincaid. I'm just not convinced that Kincaid is very good. I think that's the thing that kind of holds me back. I watch him play and I'm like, I feel like this guy should be better, but he's not. And you also have the Dawson Knox thing where Knox does contribute to a certain amount of snaps, so Kincaid's not an every down player, and that just hurts your ceiling from a fantasy perspective. I also think you can probably get the most for Dalton. Would you agree that Kincaid you get the most for among these 3 tight ends attached to Josh Allen? And he scored a touchdown in week 1. Last week was okay, so he would probably be my sell high.
Yeah, I think probably that is the one you would get the most for. I think that's right. I'm actually not, I don't say that confidently, though. I think it's an interesting question of who would get the most. Because I think people who have Dalton Kincaid are like they've seen him disappoint in multiple years now and are probably kind of done with it. Fannin is the lowest ranked in the rest of the season rankings, but obviously he's risen a lot, from where he began the season. Dalton Kincaid is tight end 12. Juwan Johnson is tight end 13. Fannin is tight end 16. I think Kincaid would probably get the most, but I don't know if it'd be by a wide margin.
Yeah, and I know that last year he was playing through a lot of injuries, and I think that he can still be productive to an extent, but the minute that he has a monster game, I think that's maybe when I would be looking to cash
Was he-
out just because
Was he really tight end 1 in week 1?
he did score a touchdown. So
Yeah, but he had
that's
4
probably-
catches for 48 yards and a touchdown. That was tight end 1? I'm
It was a
looking
bad
now.
week.
I knew he caught a
Bad.
touch. I didn't. Wow, that is shocking.
Was that in standard? Is that in standard? Maybe that's
No,
standard.
I'm looking
Your
right
high
now
PPR?
on Fantasy Pros, and hopefully I'm not like announcing that there's a typo on Fantasy Pros. I don't imagine it is a typo, but half PPR scoring says he finished tight end 1 with 12.8 points.
Ladies and gentlemen, that is the bar at tight end in 2025.
That's I did not realize that when we were reacting to that game last week. That is pretty remarkable. I'm trying to look it up now to see like if I can quickly determine if that was in fact correct.
Are any of those guys? Are you taking Mark Andrews over any of those guys? Rest of the season?
It appears to be correct, by the way.
Okay.
Wow. Sorry, say that again.
Are you taking Mark Andrews over any of those guys?
I
Or
think
would you rather have all those guys rest of the season?
I think they're all in the same tier for me.
Yeah.
Which is a cop-out answer. I think, you know what? Based on last year, like seeing Andrews start slow and then get better, I'll take Andrews ahead of them. But I don't feel good about it, right? Like I have zero conviction in saying that.
Yeah, I'm just done with Andrews because even if he does
Yeah,
what he
I
did
get
last year in the second half, how good was that really? Because you didn't have confidence starting him half the time, and if you didn't score a touchdown, he was a bust in your lineup.
The one thing I will say
So-
is like I do still expect this offense, assuming Lamar is healthy, to score a lot of touchdowns.
Yeah.
And like everybody was like, Lamar's going to regress on the passing side, 41 touchdowns, 4 interceptions. I think he probably will regress. I don't think it's going to be by so much that he can't support his
only
favorite
35 touchdowns.
Yeah,
this year?
exactly. Like I think he will still throw. I mean, he's tied for the league lead in passing touchdowns this year through 2 weeks.
So
It was just
good.
2 weeks, but I think he's going to throw for enough that if Andrews is still his favorite target in the red zone, he is going to come. He's going to at least toy with double-digit touchdown season, assuming health.
Or is the right answer just get Isaiah Likely on your team right now? Is that just the right
that's
answer?
not a bad. I worry foot injury stuff. Like I just worry when they come back how they look. And again, Andrews should have had a touchdown this week. It was like very very close to one. So
Well, Travis Kelce should have had a touchdown too.
yeah. Andrews is like 6 years younger than Kelsey, so let's not put him in the same bucket here. All right, we got to wrap up. This has gone way too long. All right, for Erickson, I'm Ryan Wormeli. Thanks everybody for tuning in. Again, be sure to check out part 1 if you missed it, where we talked more about the running back side of things. But yeah, we'll be here every week. We'll see you again next time.